welcome back to another episode of the Employee to Boss podcast. Today is a really special episode. Employee to Boss is 1 year old. Oh my gosh. I've been dreaming of this moment since I started, and I always knew that I would hit a year, but now that I'm here looking back on it, it was such an incredible year. I think in total, I only missed maybe 2 weeks of posting, both of which were because I was traveling to amazing places. I took myself on a solo trip to Costa Rica for my birthday, and the other week was just a couple weeks ago when I was traveling around Mexico with my friend. So I wanted to use this episode to really do a recap of the year from a personal point of view, but also from a business point of view, because so many things have changed in my life since the very first episode of Employee to Boss podcast came out. It feels like I'm a whole new person. My business has seen new, amazing successes that I could only dream of. Like, it's been such a crazy, amazing year. To start this, I think I want to go through some of my business successes over the year because, like I'm saying, it was just such a busy, but incredible year. I have been working with some incredible clients. I was finally able to stop doing kind of the virtual assistant side that I started my business with and go fully into podcast production and marketing. So I am so happy to say that everything I do now is podcast production and marketing. All of my clients, I run their podcast for them. A couple I do the marketing for. And this is what I was trying to do this whole time. You know, I've had my business for 2.5 years. And when I first started, of course, you have to do things to actually make money in business. And so I had a few podcast clients, but I had quite a few virtual assistant clients. And although I loved all of my clients, I did not love doing virtual assistant work of like sending emails or making them connections through social media, email, like all these different type of things that I loved my clients, but I did not want to do. So this year I really wanted to stop doing all of that and fully do podcasting. And I was able to achieve that. The clients that I have, I'm able to support myself fully on just podcasting. And my clients are just such amazing women right now. All of them are female entrepreneurs. All of them are so powerful. And their podcasts are truly making strides in the world. It's just so empowering to be able to edit and promote these podcast episodes for them because they're making a difference. Every single one of my clients, they are making a difference in the industries that they are talking about: business, entrepreneurship, mental health. I have a client who talks about wedding dress alterations and like how to prepare for feeling beautiful and dressing up and all of those amazing things. And this year, I also had the opportunity to work with a more corporate leaning client, which has really allowed me to stop doing so much virtual assistant work. I was nervous to go partially into corporate. I'm a contractor running podcasts for a corporate client. And I was, I always talk about not wanting to have a boss and all of these things, but truly what I do for them is what I do for my other clients. I run their podcast, do their marketing. It's exactly what I've been wanting to do. And at first, I kind of had a little bit of imposter syndrome with this podcast of I'm not quite an employee, but I'm not quite an entrepreneur in this role. But once I got over all the imposter syndrome, I realized there really is no shame in doing what works. And it's just amazing to be able to have a balance of my own business and then also, coworkers to rely on to make this whole business run. And I'm on the marketing team, and so I'm able to edit the podcast and do the podcast marketing. But it's really bigger than that because there's so many other parts to this business than just podcast. So I've been able to see a lot of like the big picture and take that into my own business and my clients' businesses and see, you know, kind of a bigger picture than just a podcast. So that was one of the big, amazing turning points this year that I was not expecting. I was reached out to on LinkedIn by a recruiter and they gave me an incredible offer. And like I said, at first I was like, oh, do I really want to do this? But I'm so thankful that I did because it offers me a little bit of stability while still being able to run my business how I would like. And in this climate of talk of a recession and tech companies doing massive layoffs and Twitter, that big deal right now of all those employees being fired and leaving, it just makes me feel even more secure to have my own business. And this is really why I think everyone should have a side hustle because yes, in this corporate role, I absolutely could be laid off, but it wouldn't be like I would be unemployed. I would have my amazing clients. I would have my amazing network that I've built. And I feel secure. I feel secure in everything that I'm doing. And I think that is really why a lot of people want to start their own businesses. So, if this is the first episode that you're listening to and you kind of are curious about how to actually start a business, that's what this whole podcast is about. It's about empowering you to start a business, or if you're new in business, it's about inspiring you to work harder in this business or put more effort into it and not feel this fear of having to leave corporate and being on your own. Like, I want you to be able to leave corporate and be secure or stay part-time in corporate like I'm doing currently and have, your own thing that you can lean back on. I've had amazing conversations on this podcast with some amazing, amazing entrepreneurs. I've done about 50 interviews and they're all powerful. And at the end of each episode, I ask the guest to share an action step with the audience. 3 actionable steps that the audience can start with today to make an impact on their future. And if you look in the show notes, I always write these down at the bottom of the show notes of what the action challenge is of the week. And if you have been listening along and you're actually doing those action steps, I can guarantee you that your business and life has changed because I'm interviewing people in all different industries: health, fitness, business coaching, love. I just had a love expert on the show. I've interviewed people who have created courses. I've interviewed people about mental health. I've interviewed people about starting side hustles or having an exit plan from corporate. There's a lot of empowering conversations on here, and I know people are listening, viewing the numbers of listeners that I've had or downloads I've had per episode. And so I'm thankful for each and every one of you for listening to this podcast and making a difference in your life, because that's what this Employee to Boss podcast is here for you to actually make changes and build confidence in your life. So that's kind of what's been going on in my business. I created a couple courses this year. One is about how to be an incredible podcast guest. So I talk to people almost every week who aren't ready to start a podcast, and that's totally fine. Starting a podcast does take a lot of effort, right? And so what this course is for is to teach you how to be an unforgettable podcast guest, and you can make, a lot of impact on your business just by being a guest on podcasts. And that is the truth. If you're out there sharing your story, sharing your voice, you're letting people know what your mission is for your business. It doesn't matter how you're doing it. It just matters that you're doing it. And I think that podcasting is one of the most important, powerful points of this because, if you have your own podcast, even better. But if you're on other people's podcasts, it lasts longer. I had an episode about this a couple weeks ago of how podcasting is kind of like a long lasting form of media. If you're sharing your story on Instagram, that's great too. But Instagram stories delete in 24 hours, and Instagram posts really start to blend in with the rest of your posts. And so the power of podcasting is it lasts forever. I see some of my first episodes from a year ago still getting new listens every single week. And that's because people are looking to learn about certain topics and they stumble upon my podcast, or they're looking through the episodes to see what they want to learn more about. Because every single one of my podcast episodes is still relevant and, even a year later. And so when you put out a podcast, it's really long term. I can guarantee you I will be in business for the next 5-10 years still taking on clients. And although my business might change, I know it will always be something connected to podcasting. And so if someone in 3 years listens to one of my episodes and they're like, I want to start a podcast, let me contact Hayleigh, they can still find me. And that is a very strong likelihood of people will find my episodes long after they're posted. Because of SEO and the way that podcasting works and the way that I'm titling my episodes, people find it later on. And the word that I chose to represent 2022 was networking. If you go back to, I think it was episode 4 with Mary Grace Yunez, she is a professional networker, and I had her on the show. It was right after New Year's because I wanted to focus on networking in 2022. I really didn't have that many business connections. I was newer in business, and I didn't really know any other entrepreneurs at all, in personal life. I only had a few business connections on social media and email and those type of things. So that's what I really wanted to focus on this year. And let me tell you, I did that. I have made some incredible friends. I've made some incredible connections in the podcast space and the business world, mainly through having this podcast. Of course, I've made some connections on Instagram and Facebook and have talked to them frequently, but something about interviewing them and having them on this podcast and continuing to talk to them after is a whole different level of relationship. These are people that if they have a launch in their business, they can come to me and say, hey, do you mind posting this on your story? I want more people to see it. And I'm like, of course, we are in business to help each other out. Of course I'll share for you. And they'll do the same for me. If I have a launch in my business, or I just ran a special called Start Your Podcast September. And some of these business connections and friends that I've made were so, so willing to help me promote this launch that I was like, this is what entrepreneurship is all about. It's all about helping each other. It's all about making these beautiful connections. And we've never met each other in person, but we help each other and know each other online. And I think that is beautiful. And I wasn't really focused on that in the beginning of my business. I was more worried about making money or what the heck am I doing? Like, I didn't have a business background before I started my business. Like, very few people do. And so now that I see the power of entrepreneurship and helping each other, I'm like, this is beautiful. This is a beautiful, beautiful community of people who just truly want the best for each other. And of course, in entrepreneurship, we always hear about those people who are like, competition, competition. I need to beat my competition. But I really think there's a new wave of people who are getting into entrepreneurship or standing out in entrepreneurship who are preaching more of a community over competition or death to competition type of marketing and mission. And I really think that's where I stand in this as well, because no podcast is a competition to me. I support everyone starting a podcast, or no podcast editor is competition to me, because we all have our own style and way that we edit and relationships that we want to build with our clients, that it's just a beautiful community. And to go on that point, I think it's really interesting to see how many people who maybe are podcast editors or producers or even podcast hosts show up in different ways. You know, as a podcast editor, we all pretty much do the same thing. We produce shows, maybe do some marketing, edit out some ums, some likes, some you knows, all of those filler words. But the relationships that we build with our clients can be so different. For me, I tend to work with female entrepreneurs who are very open with me about their their issues in business. I will text them. We have a deeper relationship than just pay me. I actually want to build a relationship with my clients. And that's why I don't take on a ton at once, because when that happens, I don't get to spend that quality time getting to know my clients and getting to listen to their pain points and wins and things like that. But there's other podcast producers and bigger agencies who are very contractual of, send me your audio, I'll post it for you. That's that. And that's what some podcast hosts want. Some podcast hosts don't want to have a relationship with the person that's editing their show. But I just know for me, that would not feel right. You know, I'm writing my clients' show notes and making sure everything sounds like them. And so if I didn't have a relationship with them, I wouldn't be able to do what I do at the quality that I do it. This year, I had a client come to me, Dr. Laura Foster, the host of the Soul Inspired Girl podcast, and she was actually leaving one of those bigger agencies because of just this. She's very spiritual and her podcast is amazing, and it's opening my eyes to so many different spiritual self-care type of woo-woo things that are so interesting to me. And she wanted more of that personal touch on her podcast. So we have been working together, and she's literally so sweet. Whenever she starts recording, she goes, I just want to thank Hayleigh for editing my episode. Like, I appreciate you. And then goes into the episode. And I'm like, oh my gosh, Dr. Laura, that is so sweet of you to do. Like, that's what I love in my clients. Like, they're all so thoughtful, and just as I care about them, they care about me. And I think that's beautiful. So, yes, I have built my business in a way that it's very personal. I have had amazing, amazing wins, amazing, amazing clients. maybe I'll link the shows that I'm currently working on in the show notes. Just to name a few, it is the Soul Inspired Girl podcast. I'm working on Let's Talk Memoir with Ronit Plank. I'm working on Freelance Writing Direct with Estelle and Sherry. I'm working on the Third Party official podcast. I'm working on the Dressing Up podcast. And also I was working on the Ebb and Glow podcast this year with Janelle Tremblett. She is amazing. She's one of the clients that I would text and be like, how are you? We really have a great connection. The Find Your Magic podcast with Kelsey Foremost. That one is so powerful for mental health and entrepreneurship. So, so good. I'm working on this incredible podcast called the Bet's Life podcast. Betsy actually came to me because she knew Kelsey. And so that was a connection that Kelsey made for me. And Betsy's podcast is called The Bet's Life. And it's so fun. She lives in Southern California, and the photos she posts on her blog are just so they make me jealous. They truly, truly make me jealous. And this year, I've also worked on a lot of other podcasts. I've had a lot of coaching calls with podcasters who want to take their podcast to the next level. So I started offering one-off coaching. I also have my coaching program. Another incredible podcast that went through my coaching program is the Outdoor Entrepreneur podcast with Liz Landine. I interviewed her on my podcast a while ago. I've interviewed almost all of these people on my podcast, and I'm telling you, these are some powerful, amazing women making big differences in the world. It's so much fun to work with them. I've also had a lot of incredible personal growth happen in my life. I am still living in Seattle, but I was able to move into my own apartment in this very expensive city. I'm able to afford a 1-bedroom. I have a view of the water. If you're from the Pacific Northwest, I have a view of Lake Union. It is gorgeous. Right now, I'm staring at it out my window, and the fall colors and the gloomy day, it's beautiful. Previously, I'll have to find a photo of my first desk in my first apartment. I put my desk in my closet. It was so dark in my room. I did not have a very big window, and the window is also covered with like a shade on the outside, and so I had no natural light. My second apartment was bigger, but my my desk was still in my room, and I didn't have a very good personal work separation, if that makes sense. A lot of people who work from home have this situation where like they sleep in their bedroom, they work in their bedroom, like everything happens in the same area. And now that I live alone in a 1-bedroom, my desk is right at my window with this beautiful view, and my bedroom is just where I sleep. And having that separation of work and life has made a huge difference on my mental health and all of those crazy things that when the pandemic started, we really didn't think about. Like, oh, I'm going to have to work in the same place that I live and eat maybe at my desk all the time because my apartment's small. So that's a big thing that just recently happened. I moved into this apartment in June, and living alone and having a separation, like, it makes me so proud of everything I've done in my business to be able to be here right now. Seattle is not cheap. Seattle is not a cheap city. And the fact that 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago, I didn't even have a business. I didn't even have clients. Now I do. Now I have all of these clients. I'm bringing on new clients almost, I would say, 2 a month. It's been incredible to see the growth that's happened just because I took this leap to start my business. I could have easily gone into corporate or food service or any of those things that I've done in the past. But I chose to be a little bit uncomfortable for a while, and I chose to start this business. I wasn't making a lot of money at first, but it was fine. I saw a bigger vision and I followed it, and now I'm here. It like brings chills to my body. It makes me so happy. And I think the podcast Employee to Boss has only helped. Where yes, some weeks I am like, I just edited all my clients' episodes. I just finished their marketing and now I have to do my own. But like I said before, I have interviewed probably 50 entrepreneurs, 50 plus entrepreneurs, and I have built such deep, powerful, amazing connections with them that I wouldn't have if I did not have this podcast. And on top of that, I've been a guest on, I want to say 20 plus podcasts this year alone. So I've made connections with them as well. Honestly, probably more podcasts. I'll have to go back and count how many shows I've been on, but I love talking. And so anytime someone asks me to be on their show, I'm like, of course, I would love to talk to you and your audience. If anyone listening wants to either be on my show or wants me to be a guest on your show, send me a message on Instagram or email. I'll put these both in the show notes and let's get collaborating. Speaking of collaborating, that's my word for 2023, where I still want to continue networking, but this year I did a lot of things alone. I didn't have a ton of coaches this year. I had a coach in the beginning of this year. I have a more of like a mindset nutrition coach currently, but I didn't really invest in business coaches. And I think I'm ready to do that again. I'm ready to have a business coach who will push me. Once I got this corporate client earlier this year, I focused a lot on that and retaining the clients that I had. And although I continue to bring on more clients, I didn't want to be at a point where I was so busy, I did not have time to breathe. And I can honestly say I have a lot of time to relax now. And that's what I wanted. I wanted time to relax and have fun and spend my money that I'm making and travel. Like I said, I took a week off and went to Costa Rica by myself. I'm 25. I did that for my 25th birthday. And I figured if I don't do this now, when will I ever be able to travel alone? And so that's the freedom that my business has given me. I did not have to work a day that I was in Costa Rica. And oh, how beautiful it was to just be on the beach. And my client, Dr. Laura, she actually moved to Costa Rica right after I got back. So although I've never met her, she lived in Canada before. I feel like we are very connected with our life action plans. So I'm sure you can tell through my voice and the way that I'm sharing all of this with you is I am loving how everything is going with my business and the clients that I'm bringing in. It has been just an incredible year. I wanted to share some of my most listened to episodes and talk about some of my favorite episodes as well. So my most listened to episode is my first episode, which makes sense for a lot of podcasters, but this episode was also really incredible because I talked to Terry and Sarah, the founders of Females Who Side Hustle, about how to start a side hustle and build a community and get brand partnerships. It's a really good one. My second most listened to episode is episode 9, and it's about how to build an online presence that shares your brand message. And this is with a social media manager, Nicole. Another episode that I'm super proud of that has so many listeners is Episode 10. It's about taking time off and being your own boss with a DIY travel mentor. She started her business during the pandemic. Her name is Angela Saint Yi, and she's really the reason that I took this solo trip. I did this interview back in February, and so in May, I did this solo trip and she found the place that I stayed. She really helped me plan a lot of it, and oh, amazing. Another episode that you all loved was episode 13, How to Grow, Promote, and Sustain Your Podcast. This is one of those that I see downloads come in almost every day, although this episode was back on 222, February 22nd. It's a lucky one. Some of my other favorite episodes that I've recorded through this past year have been one with my client Janelle Tremblett. It's called Navigating the Ebbs and Flows of Entrepreneurship with realtor and podcast host Janelle Tremblett. That one's a really, really good one. Another amazing one is Slay Your Schedule and Live Life by Design with Liz Landine, the host of the Outdoor Entrepreneur podcast. This was one of the investments that I made in my business. It was a financial coach because as an entrepreneur, you really don't have a 401k. You have to pay into your Roth IRA and invest it. And these are all things that I did not know how to do. And so I hired Sophia White, the owner of the Balanced Budget LLC. And so her episode is episode 6, Taking Control of Your Finances as a Business Owner. And so she's a money coach, and this episode has a lot of listeners because a lot of people need to hear it. And the last episode that I want to highlight is Educating Through Conversation with Paige Folkers. I met Paige on Instagram, and she lives in Olympia, which is about an hour and a half away from Seattle. And we met up for dinner one day and we talk all the time. And I really, really enjoy my relationship with her because it is around podcasting, but it's also, she is, someone that I would consider a friend. And so that is one of like the amazing connections that I made this year due to networking. So those are some of my favorite episodes. I love all the episodes and I love every single interview, and it is hard for me to choose, but those are just some of my favorites and some of the most listened to ones that I have to date. My goals for 2023, and I'm sure I'll do a recap in a year about how this went. So my next year of employee to boss is I want to update my music to be a little more feminine as I work on my feminine side of not, hustling so much. And so I'm looking forward to that. I want to bring on a couple sponsors, but I want the sponsors to be sponsors that you as the listeners will actually enjoy their products or services. I don't want to make money off of sponsors just for the sake of making money. I really want you all to benefit from whatever sponsors I bring on. I want to continue sharing the message that everyone has a voice worth sharing and everyone has a voice worth other people listening to, because that has been in my marketing for quite a while. I could talk about this all day, but so many people silence themselves because they're not confident enough to speak up, or because they think other people are already in that industry, or they think podcasting is oversaturated. And that is such a big myth that I'm trying to debunk on this podcast. There are a ton of podcasts out there, but there's only one of you, and only one of you who is going to share your story as you. So that is a big one. That is a big goal of mine in the next year, is to really press this point and get it in more people's ears, in front of more people's faces. It's a big goal. With that, I want to continue helping people launch their podcasts. And I have this massive goal of helping 35 people launch their podcast in 2023. And I think I can do it. I think I can get 35 entrepreneurs, business owners, or just people who want to start a podcast, start their podcast in 2023. Actually, scratch that. I want to help 50 people start their podcast in 2023. I know I can do it. I know I can get 50 people to start their podcast in 2023. So if you want to start your podcast, or you want someone you know has been talking about wanting to start a podcast, send them my way and I will help you start your podcast, because that's my goal. 50 people. It's a big goal, but I know I can do it because I truly care about this mission I have to help people share their voices. So I'm sure this next year, in a year from now, I'll look back, and just like I'm looking back a year ago from today, or from when I started this podcast, my life is almost unrecognizable in the best way possible. And I'm sure that in November, December of 2023, I'm going to look back, and this version of Hayleigh is going to be so different than the version of Hayleigh that is recording this right now and in a year. I am so thankful to each and every one of you who has supported me on this journey, who has listened to every single episode I've put out, or even just some of them. I would love it if you would leave me a rating and review. I would love it if you could share this episode or this podcast with someone who you think needs it, to be able to give them the confidence to start their business or grow their business or anything along those lines. And if you have any friends who are driving you crazy because they keep saying, I want to start a podcast, but never do anything about it, connect me with them and I will get them to shut up about that and start talking about their own podcast. Because I know we all have those friends who have, I swear to God, it's been like 2 or 3 years and they're still like, oh, I want to start a podcast. Okay, well, this is the year to do it. So thank you so much for listening to this. I feel so blessed to be able to share my voice and my story with each and every one of you. And here's to the next year of Employee to Boss. Thank you for listening to the Employee to Boss podcast. If you made it to the end of this episode, I hope that you implement the actionable steps from this week's experts so you can get started with your business today. Please rate, review, and subscribe to the Employee to Boss podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. It helps more than you could ever imagine. Remember, a little progress each day leads to big results. We come out with a new episode every Tuesday. To access our show notes, transcripts, and courses, please check out espressopodcastproduction.com.